we will build on.
Keir Starmer, a pledge is not an indication. A pledge is a word, is your word. It's a pledge.
Bit collective
it's
action.
Not in your pledge.
Well, the pledge is 3 lines, Andrew. You're asking me for more detail, and I'm giving it to you.
Well, but the fact is the 2016 Trade Union Act, when it comes to cribbing and curtailing union power, is not the key legislation. Because you're hiding behind the process.
No, the Labour Party
Why
said...
don't you do what the other candidates do and tell... Don't Labour members have a right, as they decide whether to vote for you or not, they want to... So can I bring you back to my question? What would Labour do?
Well, we've already talked about, I mean, some of the taxation decisions that the government have made around inheritance tax, capital gains tax, corporation tax, where you've given away money. Okay. This is what Jeremy was talking about in Prime Minister's question today. You've given away money that actually, quite frankly, we need to spend. And it's not just about an ageing population. That is phony. People know about the ageing population for some time. We've cut the criteria so people can't get community care. We treat our older people at the moment like dogs. It's a disgrace. We shouldn't do that.
But, excuse
we should
me,
be investing and putting the money in the primary care
Would you
services.
reverse the cuts on corporation tax?
I think that the cuts on corporation tax are missing a point because we need that money. We need that money at the moment.
Would you reverse it?
In the true sense of political takedowns, nothing, absolutely nothing comes close to Andrew Neil's brutal dismantling of Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner. One moment, they were calmly repeating rehearsed talking points with strained smiles. The next, Neil was tearing through their arguments like a pack of cheap sausages at a vegan fair. Starmer blinked in disbelief, as if his own instincts had failed him. Rayner tried to deflect with attitude, but Neil came prepared with facts, force, and a smirk. What followed was pure, unfiltered chaos. Buckle up.
He's still not a huge fan of NATO by any means, and I think that's danger for a wider Europe. At a time when Olaf Scholz in Germany is already part of the walking wounded, and now Macron is a lame duck, to have a government in Paris that is not a fan of NATO and has a soft spot for Russia, where does the leadership come from? Because I tell you this, it isn't going to come from Keir Starmer, who is a novice when it comes to geopolitics and foreign politics.
Would you reverse them?
I think that at the moment, cutting at a time where we need those services and people need those services is the wrong decision to make.
But I'm asking you, would you reverse the cut in corporation tax?
But I'm telling you, Andrew, that our priority is
you're not telling me the question.
I am. I'm
answer.
saying that the cuts in corporation tax, the cuts in inheritance tax, the cuts in capital gains tax.
But what's the cut in capital gains tax?
But what's really important, Andrew...
No, excuse me, I'm asking a question. What's the cut in the capital gains tax?
They've cut the capital gains tax. They did that. They did that as part of the coalition government.
No, they raised the capital gains tax.
Keir Starmer once claimed he would bring integrity back to British politics. That's like promising a salad will save a sinking ship. Noble, delusional, and completely useless. And just when it seemed the Labour Party couldn't get any more dull, Angela Rayner appeared, still holding on to her working-class image, a crumpled 2005 Primark receipt that somehow made it through 5 wash cycles and a Brexit referendum.
I mean, there are a lot of fundamental issues which need to be tackled in our country. A lot of them are allowed just to atrophy under the Conservatives. They are not at any reforming zeal. But given the scale of problems that we face, from health to infrastructure and so on, he just doesn't have the blueprint.
Now enters Andrew Neil, the political bloodhound in human form. This is a man who treats political spin like a pest problem that needs clearing. He doesn't just ask questions, he dismantles political careers, one sharp syllable at a time. And Keir Starmer, he walks straight into that intellectual blender, like someone trying to prove he could walk through a revolving door without moving it.
It was a tough gig for the Chancellor, but I think she's taking a much bigger gamble than people realise. In her spring statement, which is only 3 months ago, less than that, the Chancellor said that you couldn't tax and borrow your way to prosperity and better public services. But that is exactly...
Starmer's idea of strong leadership seems to be whispering vague promises, while staring blankly into the political void like he's auditioning to be the human version of wallpaper. No clear policies, no real passion, just the quiet hum of endless bureaucracy. And somehow, despite the Tory party being trapped in a self-destructing clown car, Labour under Starmer still polls like a charity raffle ticket at a billionaire's golf tournament.
If you really want to know how to fix the things in the organisation that aren't working, ask your junior staff. And I asked them 2 questions routinely. The first was, what's the biggest challenge that you've got every day you do your job? And the second, when's the last time your manager said thank you to you? And that was really revealing. And it was such an insight into how you lead people.
And then comes Angela Rayner, the self-proclaimed voice of the working class, parachuting in with her own version of political poetry, which often sounds like someone trying to read Karl Marx through the lens of Love Island. Her strategy: insult. The Tories using words longer than 3 syllables, because nothing says revolution like a thesaurus and an ASBO.
What is the Deputy Prime Minister's definition of working people?
The definition of working people are the people that the Tory party have failed for the last 14 years.
Well, the Deputy Prime Minister stood on a manifesto promising not to raise taxes on working people. It now appears she can't even define who working people are. So I'll give her another go. There are 5 million small business owners in this country. Are they working people?
I don't know how the shadow Deputy Prime Minister can stand there with a straight face when it was the small businesses, the working people of this country that paid the price of them crashing the economy, sending interest rates scoring. I think he needs to learn his own lesson.
Andrew Neil sat them down metaphorically. Of course, because, let's be honest, Starmer wouldn't agree to a real interview unless it came with a fire escape and some built-in deniability. But the roasting began anyway. Neil didn't just grill Starmer, he slow roasted him with the kind of quiet intensity reserved for your worst enemy at a family barbecue. First up was Starmer's grand vision, a Britain that somehow improves through the sheer force of spreadsheet enthusiasm. He's got all the charisma of a Microsoft Excel tutorial and the leadership instincts of a malfunctioning GPS. One moment it's make Brexit work, the next it's respect the referendum. Then suddenly it's negotiate like grown-ups, all while blinking like someone who just lost Wi-Fi in a tunnel of terrible decisions. Neil, armed with receipts longer than Rayner's expense claims, tore through Starmer's flip-flopping faster than a budget IKEA shelf in a flood. He brought up Starmer's record as Director of Public Prosecutions, the supposed crown jewel of his resume, a time when, allegedly, he stood tall for law and order. Except, of course, when he stood sideways, backward, or didn't stand at all.
They were so pious and sanctimonious about the Tories when they were in opposition, and they had plenty to have a go at on the Tories, no question about that. But it's now come back to bite them. The Sue Gray thing, I think, is a bit more worrying because it suggests that Keir Starmer doesn't have control of Downing Street in the way he should. And of course, that brought Boris Johnson down. He didn't have control of Downing Street.
You know things are falling apart when Andrew Neil starts quoting your own manifesto back at you like it's evidence in a courtroom drama. Starmer blinked metaphorically, of course. He's always blinking. It's less of a habit and more like his entire ideology is having a slow-motion nervous breakdown. Then came the topic of public spending. Starmer wants to fund the NHS, improve education, lower crime, upgrade infrastructure, hug a tree, pet a dog and still keep taxes lower than Rishi Sunak's chances of winning a dance-off, magic money tree. Try a fantasy forest complete with unicorns handing out free childcare and inflation-proof dreams. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader who speaks like every sentence ends with a mic drop, seems to think that shouting louder somehow makes policy stronger. Her big budget contribution, blaming the rich for everything short of stealing her parking spot. Rayner appears to believe the entire economy can be rebuilt by taxing billionaires until they explode into confetti made of social justice. But Neil, ever prepared, pointed out a minor detail. Even if you tax the rich into oblivion, you still wouldn't fund her promises for more than a long weekend. Her response: suggest it's the patriarchy's fault, and double down hoping no one notices that Labour hasn't released a fully costed manifesto since Ed Miliband tried to win voters over with a stone tablet.
But what I'm saying, Andrew, and
No, what you're saying is wrong. They raised the capital gains tax to 28%.
What I'm saying is that they've given tax cuts to absolutely the richest in the country at the same time where they've told the poorest people in this country over the past, it is true, at the same time that you've told the people in this country over the last 6 years, we've got to cut our coffee. No, let me finish this point because you've...
And speaking of costings, let's talk about Labour's big green energy plan, a proposal so vague it could easily be mistaken for a horoscope. Starmer keeps insisting it will create jobs, cut emissions, save the planet, and maybe even boost our Wi-Fi speeds. The actual details, buried somewhere between a consultant's PowerPoint and a black hole of accountability. Rayner, meanwhile, insists Labour's energy plan is ambitious, which is like calling Elon Musk a bit different. Ambition without clarity is just a recipe for glitter bombs and disappointment. Even Andrew Neil, who looks like he was carved from granite, raised an eyebrow so sharp it almost filed its own FOI request. Then there's the small issue of party discipline. Starmer claims to be the adult in the room, which is interesting considering his front bench behaves like the cast of a soap opera written by interns running on energy drinks. Shadow ministers contradict each other in interviews like it's some kind of team-building exercise, and policy announcements are retracted faster than a Tory apology. And yet, Starmer's approach to leadership is silence, majestic, awkward, extended silence, like he's hoping that, if he just stays quiet long enough, no one will notice the Labour Party is still wandering the ideological desert like a hungover Moses with a focus group.
I think the worry is that if you end up with this Labour supermajority, as some people are saying there will be, that they'll ram through changes, whether that's votes at 16, the levels of taxes they want to bring forward, the pensions they want to raise, their energy policies, which I think would be really disastrous for this country. So what we're saying is there's thousands of people across the country who can make a huge difference. So when it comes to July the 4th, your vote does matter, and we'd like you to vote Conservative. I do think it's really important that lots of people across the country are really worried about what Labour would do, whether that's the fact that they won't commit to defence spending, whether it's their plans of energy which are going to raise people's bills, or the fact they will raise taxes and raise your pension. Lots of people are concerned, and for those people they might think the election's a foregone conclusion, but it's not, and actually it is just a handful of people across the country who can make a huge difference.
Meanwhile, Angela Rayner's leadership style feels like she grabs every microphone like it owes her money. She charges into interviews like a boxer with a sociology degree armed with half-memorized stats and a level of moral outrage so intense it could have its own postcode. But once you peel away the passion, what's usually left behind are just echoes, loud, righteous, and vague. Andrew Neil didn't even need to break a sweat. Starmer and Rayner melted under basic scrutiny. X figures left out in the sun. Neil brought up Labour's immigration stance, a policy so unclear it might as well be hiding in witness protection. Starmer talks about fairness, firmness, and humanity. In reality, what we get is hesitation, mixed messaging, and the political version of a shrug emoji. Then came law and order. Starmer once headed public prosecutions, so you'd expect clarity. Instead, Labour's crime plan is a confusing mix of buzzwords, vague promises, and cheerful-looking graphs. The solution? More police officers on the streets, paid for, once again, by taxing billionaires. They must be magical. Every time Labour needs money, they just shake a rich person until solutions fall out like political pinatas. Neil also exposed Labour's many U-turns on tuition fees, nationalisation, and nearly every issue that involves taking a clear stance. Starmer's favourite position seems to be every position. He's a one-man policy buffet, offering something for everyone, while satisfying no one. You can't pin him down not because he's clever, but because he's slippery. Like political Teflon, just without the excitement.
Britain can't afford any more of the Conservatives. And he seems to have lost count. The answer is a quarter. Only a quarter of the billions of pounds of taxpayers' money lost to fraud is expected to be clawed back. If this government can't get the public money back, they can't be trusted with anything.
Angela Rayner tried to ground the party with her Working Class Hero Act. But let's not forget she's now firmly part of the very establishment she claims to challenge. Designer handbags, taxpayer-funded expenses, and carefully staged casual pub visits snapped from just the right angle. This is the gentrified face of rebellion. While Starmer busies himself perfecting his blank expression, Rayner is busy retweeting motivational quotes like she's gearing up for a TED Talk titled, "How to Shout About Injustice While Wearing Gucci." If Labour were a Netflix series, Starmer would be the slow-burn political drama nobody watches past episode 3, and Rayner would be the chaotic subplot that somehow gets a spin-off for being accidentally entertaining. Andrew Neil didn't tear them apart by shouting. He did it with surgical precision, like a cat toying with its prey. Calmly, fact by fact, he exposed contradiction after contradiction, peeling back the layers of mediocrity. Starmer's record, inconsistent, his policies, all over the place, his passion. Missing in action since 2020, Rayner tried to make up for it by raising her voice, but when Neil pressed for actual details, her answer basically boiled down to, "Trust us, we're not the Tories," a bold pitch if your standard for leadership is simply not currently on fire.
You've all taken a 2.8% pay rise as agreed by the MP's pay review body.
The pay review body is independent.
Hang on a second, is that particularly working class? All those things taken together, is that working class?
All those things taken together, Tom, I've just explained to you, the winter fuel allowance people are over £400 better off because we protected the triple lock, we protected the most vulnerable. I've just explained to you the welfare and the principles and the values that we will protect those that need it and make sure that they get the support, and we've got to make sure that people can get into work. And in terms of the pay rise, MPs do not have any control over that. That is completely independent of...
And let's not forget Labour's recent local election campaigner, masterclass in promising everything to everyone, while managing to say absolutely nothing. They handed out leaflets packed with more buzzwords than a Silicon Valley pitch deck, followed by interviews that left voters wondering if anyone in the party had ever actually spoken to a working class person who wasn't part of a focus group. Starmer's entire strategy now seems to hinge on one word: hope. Hope that the Tories collapse before he does. Hope that no one remembers what he said last week. Hope that if he frowns hard enough, people will mistake it for conviction. Rayner's strategy, pure adrenaline. Her speeches are fiery, no doubt, but once the flames settle, all that remains is scorched earth and a list of unanswered questions. It's like watching someone shout into a megaphone in an empty room, then declare victory because the echo agreed with them. Andrew Neil didn't reinvent the wheel, he simply rolled it downhill and watched Starmer and Rayner trip over it. He didn't have to break them. They arrived already broken, held together with contradictions, inflated promises, and enough empty rhetoric to stuff a mattress. Labour under Starmer is like a premium bottle of water, sleek design, impressive branding, but at the end of the day, it's still just water with a price tag that makes you question your life choices. Rayner. She's the cap one that promises fizz, but only delivers a tired little hiss.
In a sense, Reform have already won these local elections because they are contesting virtually every seat. Now, arguably, the Labour government's decision to cancel some of the elections was, although Reform were very unhappy about some of the places where they hoped to do well and no longer having elections, on the other hand, it meant that they could focus on a very small part of the country in order to be able to create their first steps towards creating a party organisation.
By the time Andrew Neil was finished, what remained wasn't a party ready to govern, it was a disoriented pair of politicians, blinking through the smoke of their own collapse, still clinging to talking points like Lucky Charms that forgot how to work. Starmer says he wants to lead a government of competence, which is great, once he figures out what his actual policies are, how to stick to them, and how not to unravel the moment someone named Andrew Neil walks into the room, holding a clipboard. As for Angela Rayner, her brand of bold populism might be charming if it didn't buckle under the weight of its own contradictions. The self-declared working-class champion turned political celebrity, shouting about injustice from the comfort of a chauffeur-driven car. So here we are. The Tories are falling apart, and yet Labour seems too nervous to celebrate in case someone dares to ask what they actually stand for. And at the centre of it all is Andrew Neil, the political undertaker, calmly delivering televised eulogies disguised as interviews. Maybe one day, Starmer and Rayner will find a vision that hasn't been watered down by endless focus groups. Until then, they'll continue stumbling through the spotlight haunted by the ghost of accountability, forever dodging the one man who can turn a simple, polite question into a career-ending moment of silence.
And when a Prime Minister has to say, look, I'm in control, when he has to say that less than 3 months in power, you know it's a real mess. You know it's in real trouble. When he had normally Prime Ministers say, I'm in control in their dying days. That's not in their first 3 months. As you know, as everybody at Times Radio knows, I mean, the briefing, the competitive briefing is unbelievable. I mean, I wrote it the weekend. There's so much briefing going on about Sue Graham. I'm slightly puzzled as to why they...
And if you thought that was harsh, just wait until Andrew Neil gets them both in a room again. Bring popcorn. And maybe a dictionary, because someone's going to need help explaining what integrity actually means. What's left after Neil's surgical takedown? A hollow parade of ambition, dressed in borrowed conviction, stumbling through Parliament like a toddler in oversized boots. No clear philosophy, just reactive politics, neatly wrapped in corporate slogans and recycled promises. Behind every bold statement is hesitation. Behind every policy, fear. Fear of offending anyone with a real opinion. It's leadership without risk, passion without direction. Starmer and Rayner may talk about progress, but all they deliver is confusion. Neil didn't need tricks or traps. He just turned on the lights. And what we saw wasn't a government in waiting, it was to career politicians bluffing their way through a credibility crisis.